recording with Dr. Ted Postol for your second time on here on
Yes.
Sunday, February 19th,
Oh, okay.
2023 at 3 whatever p.m. Eastern time. Not important. You've been on here before about a year ago, and I just had Ray McGovern on the other day, and he mentioned you several times, and it just kind of sparked a memory. I was like, I need to reach out again. But
Yes.
Dr. Postal, please introduce yourself for everybody.
Well, my name is Ted Postol. I have the glorified title of Professor Emeritus of Science, Technology, and National Security Policy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'm following. My area of expertise or interest is really technology issues that have some kind of direct relationship to international security problems. So it's a mix. The added value that I would claim or hope I have is basically putting a technical data point or marker on a debate that has something to do with political issues and or policy issues, and so that would so I'm not a true expert in political issues, but I have to know quite a bit about them in order to be able to understand what technical issues are relevant. You know, a lot of times there is no technical dimension that is significant. It's mostly social. So I've had quite a bit of experience outside of academia. I was a scientific and policy advisor to the chief of naval operations, and that gave me a lot of opportunity to be in the belly of the beast and also to understand the belly of the beast. And since that time, I've been at places like Stanford and then, of course, a faculty position at MIT.
Um, can we lie on the, I guess, the safety and reassurance that things have never gone nuclear? Can we continue to rely on that, or are we maybe entering uncharted territories where if we back Russia into a wall, or if we keep escalating in Ukraine, is it going to jump up a notch? Is the unthinkable going to happen? I think for so long we've just assumed it never could because we got through the Cold War. But more and more so, it kind of seems like that certainty is not there.
Well, I think things have changed quite a bit. I do think the danger of an inadvertent escalation is much larger. I can't quantify it. I mean, it's just a sense from what I see in the actions and reactions of political leadership on both sides, and also the circumstances, which are current circumstances, are really quite different from that of the Cold War. The Cold War was kind of had moments of high tension, which of course could have resulted in an inadvertent escalation. The obvious points are, for example, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in the 1980s there was a belief that was growing among the political leadership of Russia that NATO was planning to attack Russia with nuclear weapons, and so
Able
we
Archer,
had these. I'm sorry.
Able Archer,
Yeah,
1983.
Able Archer, right? And so we certainly had points in the in that time interval where things were more dangerous than at other times, but still there was basically an underlying sense that uh, nobody was going to do anything really stupid or dangerous, uh, and that helped us. Uh, my own view, having said this many times to people in discussions, is that if I had to guess that we would get through the Cold War without a nuclear war, based on no knowledge of it, but just someone sort of describing the circumstances to me, I would have given us a very low chance of getting through it. And I think the reason, well, fortunately, I was wrong, but we don't. It could have been wrong by 1% or 100%. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I think a big factor that has eroded, unfortunately, is the the sense of fear that political decision makers have about uncontrolled escalation. Not only the effects of nuclear weapons, but also the possibility of uncontrolled escalation, and we see that in multiple ways. The fact that Putin would suggest that things could go nuclear, the fact that Biden, uh, although he has shown some concern about the possibility of escalation, I don't think he is in any way completely ignoring it. He has allowed his not very well informed uh, well, not the policy advisors, to push him into doing things that I think are, my own judgment, are quite unwise. We have a political situation in NATO that is, I think, very dangerous. The Nobody that I'm aware of, you can please correct me, has shown any concern about the Polish government. Uh, we have a government in Poland that is already at odds with the European Union over its manipulation of the court system there. There have even been discussions about cutting European Union aid to Poland in response to their attempts to ignore agreements that they took part in order to become a NATO member. And I just, because of an accident of my research, I have become reasonably familiar with the players in Poland, and my view is they are very dangerous, and they are tremendously activist in their anti-Russian views. They made a statement only a few weeks ago before the decision to send tanks to Ukraine that they were going to send the German Leopard tanks that they had to Ukraine, even if NATO decided not to send those tanks. They were going to just sort of say, we're going to do it. And so they're kind of a wild card. They have, I can personally, in fact, part of the reason I know a little bit about this is because I have personally been involved in studies of an air accident in 2010 that killed a large number of the Polish leadership, along with the then Prime Minister Lech Kaczynski, and and the amazing, just extraordinary attempts by the current government to fabricate a claim that the Russians were responsible for this, when any analysis, as in fact I've done analysis on this, shows that the reason for the accident was Lech Kaczynski ordered the pilot, the pilot and the crew, to land without instruments in a dense fog, and the chances of them successfully landing was really just about zero. And he had so intimidated his crew that they did something that they never would ever have tried under normal conditions. And it's clear as day. We have all the data, and yet they're trying to turn this into some kind of conspiracy on the part of the Russians to kill the political leadership of Poland at the time. And that wouldn't be so important if we didn't have a crisis like this, because that event tells you how determined this government is to go after the Russians, uh, whether or not it's appropriate. I'm not going to, there's a lot of blame to go around here, but there's no blame at all on the Russians for this particular horrifying and unfortunate accident. So this so this law and justice party uh, is potentially quite dangerous, and they announced only a little while ago, last week, I think it was, might not be quite right, but in the last week or two, that they wanted to send combat aircraft to Ukraine, and that they would do it if they decided to do it. They would not let NATO stop them. Well, this is asking for escalation, and so I see Poland as a potential trigger point for some form of uncontrolled escalation, and it's clear that NATO has little control over these characters. I mean, the European Union hasn't been able to get them to agree to follow the agreements that they signed in order to get all this aid that Poland gets from the European Union. And now they're doing this with NATO. And so this big movement that NATO expansion was supposed to bring. I mean, I think it's sad. It could be funny if it weren't so dangerous, that we were going to bring democracy to all these Eastern European countries, and you have this expansion to NATO to Poland and the Czech Republic and Hungary in 1999, and certainly Hungary and Poland are not flourishing democracies. And yet the argument for Ukraine is, oh, democracy is on the line. Well, start your worrying with some of your own countries that are part of NATO. So I think the chances of escalation are increasing all the time. So
Now, if Poland did an action, regardless of NATO's approval, would any resulting reaction from Russia trigger, I guess, traditional NATO responses? Like if my little brother went up and like punched like a 6'5" linebacker, I don't know if I would get involved. I might look at him and be like, "You're gonna learn a lesson. Like I said not to do that. You're drunk, and like." So if Poland steps out there, do we just go, "Hey, that we didn't approve of that. Whatever happens, happens." You sacrifice Poland so you don't have World War III. Is that possible?
yeah, I think I think there will be more adult leadership involved if something happens. I think the French and the Germans have shown a good deal of common sense in this whole thing. They, of course, Merkel gets blamed for all these problems with Russia, that she somehow failed to be hardline with Russia, for example, over the Nord Stream pipeline. This pipeline that was delivering gas to Germany, and a commercial arrangement between Russia and Germany. And seems to me what she was trying to do was to pull Russia into a more normalized economic arrangement with Western Europe, and thereby hopefully with that comes some kind of normalization or softening of the confrontation between Russia and Western Europe. And uh, my own view is it failed because of the Americans in the American aggression in NATO. Because first of all, we did destroy the Nord Stream pipeline. I happened by accident. Seymour Hersh and I know each other a long time, and
Okay.
I've helped him with he's a brilliant journalist, but he occasionally needs technical knowledge that he doesn't have, and I have played that role from time to time. And he asked me about this. He asked me some questions because he was researching the paper, and I'm absolutely certain that he knows this is journalistically correct, and part of the reason for it is he had a lot of questions that were very vague. He had a very vague description of what happened when we first started talking, and I asked him a bunch of specific technical questions for him to go back to his sources and ask for answers. And we went through several iterations of this process, and each time he came back with specific technical information that only somebody who knew what they were talking about could have provided.
Mm.
This is, it's like when you're an expert in a, so, if you know, I mean, I know nothing about sports. I have some interest, but I'm really very low level of interest. And I'd start telling you about how so-and-so's team is, you'd quickly pick up
Yeah.
on whether or not I had a true expert understanding. And this is the kind of process that can go on in a technical discussion. And it's clear that the people he was talking, whatever his sources were giving him quite accurate information. And I filled in some dots somewhere, and then he checked it with his sources. And through that, we got a much clearer explanation of what happened for his article. So his audience benefited from that. But this couldn't have happened if he wasn't if his sources weren't expert. So no way. So I'm very confident that whoever he was using as a source or sources um, knew what they were doing. They had a detailed knowledge. So this Nord Stream thing happened. And I have a joke with a friend of mine, uh, which might be of interest, who's a very high level, he's retired now, but was a very, very high level Democrat. And he and I are old friends. And he says, well, he has great respect for Cy's journalistic capabilities, but he just can't believe that Cy's story is correct because it's so stupid. What they did was so stupid, and the joke between us is, I think they are that stupid, and he doesn't. Because and although I think in my case I have this direct experience uh, with it, and it is an extraordinarily reckless thing to do, and in fact, uh, it's ambiguous. And this ambiguously did as much damage to the German economy as it did to the Russian economy, because the Russian loss of revenue from the loss of the Nord Stream pipeline appears to be being made up at a very high level, if not surpassing it, in sales to China and to states in the southern hemisphere, which are not following the dictates of the United States government, saying that you need to do this. You need to not buy Russian goods. So there's an element of unreality in the behavior of the people around Biden who work on national security issues. There's this this weather balloon incident is another example. It's possible. It's possible that there might have been some kind of equipment or use of weather equipment on that balloon by Chinese military sources. It's possible. I think it's well. It's but if you ask the question as a person who knows something about intelligence, and I think I can claim I do, what would they get out of this that they don't already have by numerous other means? So if if I go to China, and I have gone, people come and visit me from the U.S. government, and they ask me what I saw. And I have a rule: the people who have visited me, typically the same people, and I have a rule that they know about. I do not speak about anybody who I've met with, because I don't trust the intelligence community to use the information responsibly, and I don't think it's appropriate, because these people I visit are friends and colleagues. But I do say to them, well, it looks like the feeling in China is such and such, and that's potentially useful information to them, and I try to be helpful. But the 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 appetite these organizations have for information is insatiable, and they have no rhyme or reason. I guess their reason would be, well, we get enough information, we put together, we piece it together, and we get good insights. Well, I saw a lot of the insights that these people had when I was inside the government, and I never trusted them to be even close to accurate. So, so I don't believe the argument, although it could be true if the people involved were less biased or better informed. Because if you sit inside a black room looking at China, through a television or reading, you don't know nearly as much as having been there, and these people can't go there.
Hmm.
At least most of the analysts. So you these organizations, whether they're American or Russian, and I have dealt with the Russians on these matters. They have approached me, not very successfully, but they have. Um, the these organizations, they have their own rules and morality, and the morality is not very high in any of them. I mean, they're all rather similar in that respect, and uh, so nothing surprises me in that respect, that they would try to get information by doing something like this. But the question is, what could they possibly get in other words, given that it's a stupid thing to do and it doesn't produce much, it's possible that these organizations could try to, one or another organization could try to do something, but that still is nothing useful. So maybe some idiot in the Chinese intelligence community put a box to collect certain photographs, which incidentally a weather balloon would take under normal circumstances, and they try to use that. But the photographs, of course, are no better than what satellite images can provide them, and in fact, many situations they're worse. They're not getting communications like some people are saying. You don't know where the balloon's going to be. You want a regular line into communications if you want to take advantage of it for intelligence purposes. And any communications that you use that are of concern to you are encrypted. I mean, if you can go and use WhatsApp and have an encrypted communications these days, thanks to the insatiable desire of the American intelligence community to violate the Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens, which was revealed to a great extent by Snowden, and Edward Snowden. and and if you look at the reaction to Snowden, that he's some kind of terrible traitor, he's not a he's a he stood up for the Constitution of the United States. You can argue that there were crimes, that there was information released that shouldn't have been released, and there's an accurate argument for that. But there were things people did who ran the Underground Railroad
Mm-hmm.
that were against the law at the time. And so a little bit of perspective on the part of American leadership when they were caught lying. Mr. Obama himself was caught lying to the American people, that maybe they ought to think about the fairness of blaming Mr. Snowden for something he did on behalf of the American people and the Constitution when they did not meet their responsibilities themselves. It's more, embarrassment to them. I know this gets us off the subject, but
No, keep going. Who cares?
but it's it the potential for escalation, I think, is real, and it may happen if in some way the Russians are losing badly enough that they just decide that they're going to do something.
Yeah.
I tend to be honest. This will sound unfortunately could be taken as disloyal, but it's not. It's just an intellectual judgment. I actually think Putin is more careful about these things than his counterparts outside. Now, that doesn't mean he won't do it. I mean, nor does it mean that he's a nice guy. What he's done is terrible. This invasion is just terrible and inexcusable. But he does show a great deal of caution in what he does. He made, disregarding the immorality of invading Ukraine, he made a terrible mistake by not understanding that his army was really not what he thought it was. Neither did we. We were predicting a few days of a blitzkrieg and then Kiev falling. So it's important, because there's no question in my mind he would have not tried what he did if he understood that his army was that screwed up. But now he's committed. His level of commitment is his judgment. I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's really wrong. He's done incredible damage to Russia, and at the same time, he's taking advantage of the greater size and population of Russia to just grind down the Ukrainians, and it's, to me, it just makes me sick, really sick, and troubled to see all the loss of life. And when I say all the loss of life, I'm not only talking about these poor innocent Ukrainian soldiers and civilians, but I'm also talking about these poor innocent Russian soldiers.
Sure.
These young people are put out there to be murdered. They're not well trained. Yeah. They're not well armed. It's a terrible thing to do to your own people. And just yesterday, I think it was, Kamala Harris went on this tirade, and she was at a meeting in Europe, about how everybody from the top to the bottom in Russia has been complicit in these war crimes, or the Russian war crimes. Well, there's no doubt that these Russian war crimes are crimes and they're inexcusable. But there are war crimes that the West has engaged in, and it looks a little hypocritical to me, and more importantly, who cares about me? It looks hypocritical to a large part of the rest of the world when the United States is talking about other people's war crimes when we have been involved in all kinds of inexcusable actions. And the escalation of demonizing everyone in Russia, almost, well, all the troops, and is uh, is a very dangerous thing to be doing, I think. And now there's no, at the same time, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to excuse what the Russians have done, but there's a lot of blame to go around here. The fact of the matter is that the United States, I'll say NATO is led by the United States. All these denials by NATO, I mean, it's just funny. I mean, I didn't do it. My brother did it. It's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, and the United States calls all the shots, and it really twists the arms of all these smaller nations, including smaller nations like Germany and France, to knuckle under to the American desire. So, for example, as I'm sure you know, in 2008, NATO made this extraordinarily incendiary this claims that they were looking forward to introducing, bringing bringing the NATO alliance to Georgia and Ukraine. And the Russians made it very clear that this was a red line. And the French and the Germans were against it. And the United States was able to roll over the French and the Germans and get this thing instituted. And in a final statement, this Bucharest statement by NATO in 2008. And 6 months later, in August, you had a war between Russia and Georgia. And incidentally, in spite of these political people's restatements about the facts are that this guy Saakashvili, who was the president at the time in Georgia, he sent Georgian troops to attack these two enclaves that were trying to become independent, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And those enclaves were being protected by UN peacekeeping forces who happened to be Russian. So why is anyone surprised that the Russians came back at them? Now, I mean, if you were to look at the newspapers, like the New York Times at the time this occurred, they were screaming about Russian aggression. Well, to be sure, the Russians knew about this because they have such close ties over such a long time with Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew about this decision as soon as it was made. And I'm sure they just waited around and built up their troops to react, So they're not totally innocent. But, who encouraged this kind of behavior? Well, it was NATO. And then when it happened, who denied any responsibility for it? It was NATO. And who still denies any responsibility for it and points to it as if it was just totally the fault of Russia? NATO. So really the United States. And now a somewhat similar thing has happened. It's more complex in the case of Ukraine, for sure. Now there's a war in Ukraine. Well, didn't you learn anything? Didn't you get any kind of sense that it was not a good idea to move in this direction over this period of time since 2008? It's like there's no learning behavior. So whether Putin is right or not in his belief that Ukraine, a NATO allied Ukraine, poses an existential threat to Russia, whether that's true or not, This is what he believes, and this is what a lot of Russians believe. And I have numerous friends from my time working in Russia, and those people are pre-selected. They wouldn't have anything to do with me if they weren't interested in working with the West. You know, I'm just trouble. I've met a few people who really don't like Westerners when in my visits to Russia. And let me tell you, there's no question in my mind that the people I'm dealing with are very moderate and outward looking. And uh, they uh, they all felt that Ukraine was culturally tied to Russia when Ukraine separated, when Ukraine became a separate state. They weren't talking aggressively taking it over or anything. These people are not interested in military, they're not promoters of military conflict, but they did state uh, and it clearly felt that the cultural ties between Ukraine and Russia were strong. And then over these years, since Ukraine became an independent state, I guess it was roughly around 1990, the West has tried and tried and tried to to move Ukraine into the uh, Western alliance, if we call it that. Now, there's no doubt that the Western Ukrainians have a great affinity for the West and want to be part of it. And I think those desires should be respected. I'm not opposed to that. On the other hand, uh, having the United States in Ukraine, pouring billions of dollars of support for any element that wants to go more Western, as they did in 2014 during the Maidan revolution or uprising, that's improper. If there's no doubt that there was an indigenous foundation for this movement, and that should be respected. But if you have people in Mexico who are anti-American, and the Russians come in and they give them military equipment and large sums of money, there's no doubt in my mind that we would go berserk if that were going on. And there's very little clear evidence of interference in the 2016 election by Russia. I would be very surprised if there wasn't some interference. So I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I have to make a giant step in assumptions given what's been shown to us. Very little that you can really see. And even if it were true, which it might well be, it had no effect on the election. Hillary Clinton lost the election because she was an unattractive candidate. That's why she lost the election. She mismanaged her campaign. It's not the fault of the Russians. It's it's her fault. So so you have this constant looking for a scapegoat that's going on among people who call themselves progressive, and the progressives have gone wild. I mean, I know why I'm worried about the autocratic reactionaries in the Republican Party. I know why I'm worried about them. They're dangerous and they're anti-democratic and so on. But the anti-democratic behavior of so many people who see themselves as progressive is extraordinary. And they're involved in active, anybody who has a different view or judgment, even one that's extremely well-based in fact-based analysis, immediately becomes accused of disinformation. So this is what's happening now with the Hirsch piece.
Mm-hmm.
This is a man who has been right about every major breakthrough that he has made in his career. giant, giant, giant breakthroughs. And you have somebody like this editor at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, who I have the unfortunate experience of having to have dealt with. He's raising questions about, does he really know what he's doing? Of course he knows what he's doing. This completely unaccomplished guy in journalism questioning this giant, and empty questions at that. So this is the kind of stuff you're seeing, the complete absence of a response in the Western press to this gigantic insight, perhaps one of the most important insights in his entire career, is extraordinary. It really raises questions about the danger of escalation from the inactivity or the irresponsible behavior of the Western American press. Nobody is raising any questions about this weather balloon. It's a joke. They're shooting down now, private balloons and commercial balloons and scientific balloons, and it's very interesting that we have no information of any kind about what they have found with regard to the debris from this weather balloon that the Chinese. That's very strange. I mean, I know why you classify things. I was in the Pentagon. I saw a lot of things that I still, even though it was 20 years ago, more than 20 years, it was 40 years ago now, 30. I wouldn't breathe a word of some of these things that I was aware of. Even now, I just didn't happen as far, I don't know anything about it. And so I have I realize that there's a need for secrecy on certain kinds of things, but secrecy is a danger to democracy. So you have to be as careful as you can be with classification as you can be. And today they just classify everything. It's incredible. And they're just classifying what's embarrassing to them. And if you look at actually the classification rules, which nobody follows, they specifically say you cannot classify something because it's an embarrassment to you. But when the president isn't willing to release information to support his claim that a meteorological balloon was being used for spying, well, it's possible that there was something on the balloon, but it's almost zero probability that it was of any consequence in terms of a true intelligence gathering capability. If it was there, and there's a reason to be very, it's like the dog that didn't bark. This is what's going on here. Why don't we have this data? And so this is really where we're edging toward an uncontrolled escalation, because people are constantly inventing threats, inventing insults, inventing dangers that don't exist, and escalating things with potential adversaries where we have real differences. I'm not saying the Russian government is our friend at this point. We've done enough that I can understand why they're no longer our friend.
Yeah.
But I'm saddened by that, because I don't think this had to be the situation, but that's the situation. So I don't think we should, ignore the fact that Putin is deeply hostile to us, but I think making it a personal thing, like there are no other Russians who feel the same way, that's ridiculous. I mean, that is a real danger, because there are a lot of Russians who feel that way, and they're not all knuckle dragging maniacs. There are a lot of reasonable people who have said, we tried and tried and tried and tried with the Americans, and every time we try, they turn around on us and do the opposite of what they claim they're doing. And you can't, you wish people didn't react as strongly, but at the same time, it's hard for me to think that I wouldn't react in a similar way if I were in their position. To be, you have to try to put yourself in the other people's shoes. And we're now doing that with the Chinese. I mean, We have an economic competition with China. That doesn't mean we have to have a war with them. This is crazy, escalating this into a military conflict. You already have tense relations with China, and you cancel a potentially useful uh, visit of your Secretary of State over a weather balloon, which, you know, so this may sound like I'm off the mark, but it's not off the mark. It's raising, the general feeling, the general background of tension and constant distrust of the other's motivations and underlying objectives is what leads to decisions that can escalate very rapidly into a war. And it's particularly interesting to me, who has thought a lot about the situations that could lead to a nuclear war. I haven't, uh, some of the things I've documented were not even briefed to the highest level people when they occurred. I know, for example, I uncovered through a series of academic work and uh, um, uh, the foundations of how a false alarm occurred quite a long time ago now, 1995, between Russia and where the Russians thought they might be under attack by the United States. And it's getting revisited by scholars in several disciplines right now. And when I happened to have a talk with Bill Perry, who was then Secretary of Defense when this incident occurred, he told me he was never told about it. He knew nothing about it. So at the time that he was Secretary of Defense, I was briefing people in the Department of Defense about it because they didn't know about it. And I actually went to Russia to tell them what I knew because I didn't want to be put in a position where somebody in Russia could say you're spying on us. So I have to say I was a little nervous. Going to Russia and telling them things that I knew that they considered to be a high level secret. On the other hand, my objective was to defuse the situation and see if we could find a way to reduce the chances of an accident of this kind in the future. And I got no cooperation at all from the American side, none at all. And so there's a long history, from my personal point of view, there's a long history of the Americans, every time when I was involved, treating the Russians disrespectfully and in ways that showed no concern about legitimate Russian concerns, just treating them like dirt. So, and in the 1990s, I had conversations with good friends who were involved with Russia as well. And at the time, we kept shaking our heads saying, this is going to go badly. And now it has, over these years. So from my point of view, I've seen the whole history of this personally. And now you have this escalating demonization of all Russians, right? These guys in the field, the people responsible in the field are the military commanders. They are responsible for war crimes. There is no question about that. I have no reservations about saying that. And on the other hand, the soldier who has no idea what to do, who's ill-trained, who's not disciplined, who is allowed, who wants to go out and shoot people, sometimes like our people did in combat, but has no training, no disciplinary oversight, no indoctrination about what you can and cannot do in warfare. They do it, and that doesn't make them. It doesn't make it forgivable, but it's the the people responsible are the commanding officers who don't control their troops. And that was the principle behind the Tokyo and Nuremberg trials, and I completely agree with those principles. I have no problem at all, except um, when you let someone like Albert Speer
Mm-hmm.
go, but you execute his subordinate who was basically carrying out his orders. That's a transgression of justice. Albert Speer was guilty. If his subordinate was, he was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, same with Eichmann. So that's a problem, and I do think the Russians, the Russian military culture has to be held accountable for that in some way. Well, I don't know if it has to be, but it should be. That's where the judgment should be. But the troops, they do what they think is okay. They do what they're let, what the officers allow them to do. And but now we have a situation where there's murder, there are war crimes on both sides. From all the information, it's very hard to get any information about this from the Western press. But if you look at other press, there's clearly cases of war crimes on the Ukrainian side. Um, does it balance the war crimes, in terms of numbers and violence? I don't know, because you can't get any honest attempt to provide all the information. But that's war. War is filled with this. So you have all these experts, particularly those around Biden. And in order to become an accepted expert among these Biden people, who I have dealt with from time to time, you basically have to agree with them. In other words, if you're Ted Postol and you don't think the Russians are evil, you're naive.
Mm.
So you're excluded. You
Mm.
can't enter a debate with them. You can't, they have this. They're not responsible for anything. Every time you raise a question about something they did that was clearly stupid, um, the reaction is, you don't know what you're talking about. It would have happened anyway. So you go ahead and you have this Russian reset, and the Russians make a good faith effort to show they're serious about it by opening an air corridor from Western Europe to Afghanistan. And your response is to introduce a new missile defense system that looks like it's aimed at Russia. This uh, this Aegis
Aegis Ashore.
system,
Aegis
naval
Ashore.
system, and the Russians say, we're concerned about this, and you say to them, as Hillary Clinton did, you have no right to say anything about this. This is our business. You have no rights to say anything here. And every time you try to say, well, if you're really worried about defending Europe from Iranian ballistic missiles, which we don't think is a threat, nuclear armed ballistic missiles, which we don't think is a threat, then let us help. And and the Russians have their own proposals. Did you lose me?
Yeah. I'm not sure what just.
I haven't
That
done
was.
anything.
No, you didn't do anything. Can you see me, Mr. Postal? Can you see me?
I can see you. I have no problem.
Okay. I don't know what in the world just happened.
You lost visual contact, or
Yeah. No, I don't know. Something messed up. We're good though. Keep talking. Sorry.
yeah,
Hillary-
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So so then the Russians come forward with their own proposals to become part of the system, and we say no. And it's our decision. It's not yours, and you have nothing to say about this. So it's not surprising the Russians get the view that, first, their voice is not heard, and secondly, the this system may be really being aimed at them, because it looks like it's being aimed at them. That's the way it looked to me, and I know something about missile defense. so, so, um, so when your reset fails because you mismanaged it, Ms. Secretary Clinton, um, What do? You blame it on the Russians. You can't ever depend on the Russians to follow through. Well, I can't find anything that we the Americans did to show the Russians that we were serious about the reset when they did things that showed they were serious about the reset.
Mm.
So they had a multi-billion-dollar deal to sell S-300 and S-400 air defense systems to Iran. We didn't like that because we always want the option to go in and beat up the Iranians with our aircraft. And those systems are capable enough that we can't ignore them. So we wanted the Russians, we were lobbying the Russians before this reset to not follow through with the deal. It was a deal. They had signed a contract already. And Putin decided to stop the contract. And this caused incredible backlash in the Iranian government against Russia. What did he get for it? The American missile defense and accusations that he's not cooperating. So this idea that Putin is responsible for everything, yes, he's a nasty guy. Yes, he made a decision that was immoral to go into Ukraine, no question about it. But who put him in a position where he was contemplating this kind of behavior? You know, and turning it into his problem, that if he disappears, it's not going to be a problem anymore, is the ultimate in self-deception. If Putin were to disappear, we're not. I don't know why everyone, all these people, think it's going to be a more moderate government replacing him. It may be, but I'll give you odds that it's less moderate rather than more moderate. So I don't know, and nobody knows, but this is the kind of foreign policy that shows no understanding of what these people, no strategic vision of any kind. So Pamela Harris says the other day, she says, well, we don't like that the Russians are cozying up with China. Well, why wouldn't they? You just did everything. You did everything you could possibly do to show them that it's a good idea to cozy up to China. You don't like it. Behave differently. So this is why I am very concerned about the potential escalation to a nuclear exchange. And then you get the experts again. I keep going back to because I never get to the point I had in mind when I started.
No, keep going. No, it's great. Keep going.
Yeah. All these characters, they're experts on nuclear war and the dangers of nuclear war. They're all these. They got a PhD in a political science academic environment. They have no experience in looking at the world, from inside a government so they say, oh, well, how would a nuclear war start? The Russians might try to show their resolve by exploding a nuclear weapon over the Black Sea. My joke used to be when I was in the Pentagon, I'd say, oh yeah, we're going to show the Russians we're resolved by exploding a nuclear weapon over Kwajalein. So,
yeah.
That was my joke.
Yeah, that really worked.
Yeah. So, well, I have no idea. I don't think it's knowable what could lead to the use of first nuclear weapons. But let me give you a scenario that I've been thinking about recently. In 6 months, you're going to have all kinds of German Leopard tanks going up against Russian tanks in Ukraine, a place where the Nazi invasion caused the biggest loss in modern history, military loss in modern history, where the battle for Kiev resulted in the surrounding of 600,000 men in arms in the invasion in Operation Barbarossa. That's the biggest encirclement in the history of warfare. Almost all of those people were dead. because when they surrendered, they died in these extraordinary murder camps. I don't know what else to call them. You can call them murder camps set up by, because they were Slavic, and this horrifying racist attitude of the Nazis. And that's the place that occurred, what, in the 1930, 41 or so, or 41. And people remember that. That's not, it's far back, but it's enough back that, people have family they lost in this, grandparents. And it's a big part of Russian culture. You talk to a Russian and you talk about the Great Patriotic War, everybody lights up. This is part of it's embedded in Russian culture, in the government's way of trying to keep people patriotic. Maybe it should or shouldn't, but World War II is still pretty big with us today.
Mm-hmm.
And we only lost a few 100,000 people. They lost tens of millions of people. And you have those Russian tanks being taken apart by those Leopard tanks. That's where I would, if I were Putin, I'd put a nuclear weapon. Find a concentration of Leopard tanks and just put one or two on them and just say, this is all I'm doing. I just want you to know this is all I'm doing, but let's stop this. And that's my scenario. Now, it's not a scenario. I'm just, this is a wild,
Sure.
wild guess. But the point is that I think if Putin's going to use nuclear weapons, he's going to try to find something that's symbolic and potentially of military use. And it's not the end of the world if nobody reacts to it. I mean, but it is the end of the world if it's the beginning of a ladder of escalation. But when you want to talk about paths to escalation, there's one that the geniuses around Mr. Biden ought to be thinking about. And I don't see any thought from these people at all. It's just like A, then B, B, then C. It was just like the discussion during the Cold War. Oh, the Russians will sweep across Europe. Well, we know that the Russian army, after a big buildup, couldn't even sweep into Ukraine, yet alone sweep across Europe.
Yeah.
You hear this argument, oh, if we let Putin get away with this, think of what he's going to try to do in the future in the Baltics. Well, if there's anything you can say about Vladimir Putin, is he's not stupid. He did make the mistake of his life trying to go into Ukraine, no question about it, because he thought he had an army he didn't have. But he now knows he doesn't have an army. And anyone who thinks he's that stupid that he's going to attack NATO directly is a fool. But people are so used to saying that, without thinking, because all of this discussion is without thought or analysis. So they say, well, what's he going to do next? It's the same. The argument has no intellectual integrity behind it. And that's what you hear all over the place, still, even now. Oh, if he uses nuclear weapons in Ukraine, well, we'll really escalate. We'll really show him we mean business. We're going to introduce American forces. Right? You want to guarantee that nuclear weapons are going to be used again if you introduce nuclear? I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? If the Russians, or if the Russians generally believe that this war is a war for their survival as a nation, whether or not it's true, if they believe it, you're going to put American forces into Ukraine after they've already gone to the point of using nuclear weapons against something? You ask yourself, what is going? What are these so-called experts about? There's not even if you were talking to somebody in a casual street conversation about something like your brother going in, punching the linebacker in the nose, you'd all know that it's a stupid thing to escalate this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these guys talk about escalate. Oh, I'd go over there and I just punch him in the nose myself too. Use common sense. So there's no no indication of thought among these people. And Biden has surrounded himself with these kinds of people. And it doesn't look like to me he's standing up to them. And of course, it's ultimately his responsibility. I I on a personal level think Biden is a very decent man. I
Sure.
like him. I actually do like him as a person. I I I happen to pretty much agree with his domestic politics. I think
Sure.
he's heroically trying to help stabilize the domestic situation. I have no, I support him fully on that. But when I look at his foreign policy, I should say, how could he allow himself to be sucked in by these people around him? And and that's what we're facing. So yes, I believe that the danger of a mistake leading to an escalation is very high. And I think it's more on the Western side than it is on the Russian side. And and I hope that nothing happens. I just keep crossing my fingers and toes that nothing will happen. So that's
Feel my heart rate increasing as this episode goes on. I'm just,
well,
man, I
it's
was,
as my wife says, it's a she, since I know a lot about how nuclear weapons are used, and I actually was involved in targeting nuclear weapons when I was in the Pentagon. Uh, she says to me, "Well, the one thing I want is to make sure I go fast." She says,
yeah.
and I says, "Don't worry, we're right near Moffett Air Force Base here, Moffett Naval Base here, and in Boston we have a second home, and we're right in the middle of the Boston Navy Yard." So
Well, then we're golden. We're not going to even notice it. It's
yeah,
just going to be
we're going to
gonna be
just
a
be
flash.
evaporated, and
Hypocenter. That's where you want to be. Yeah,
right, right,
maybe I should get out of Maine. Maybe I need to go. I need to go get a 1 bedroom apartment across the street from the White House. I'll just
right,
I'll be good. Go
right,
right
right.
there.
But
Whew.
it's a very dangerous situation, and
Yeah,
frankly, I think Putin may be the more stable in this particular sense than the Western leadership. Not to say that he isn't dangerous. He's
sure.
very dangerous. I think he could use nuclear weapons. When he says, "I'm not bluffing," I
Yeah,
don't see that. I don't dismiss this as a bluff.
yeah. You don't want to call a bluff on him saying I'm not bluffing. This isn't
Yeah.
slapping each other or
Now, he
like
won't do anything overtly suicidal, is
yeah,
what I believe. In other words, if he did what this wild postulated situation, because
yeah.
there's no way of knowing what could be done. I'm quite sure I would expect him to make it very clear that this is what we're doing and no more. In other words, provide a path for the West to back down, because I think he's not totally crazy. But would the West know how to handle it?
Mm.
Can send American troops, and it's just, and he does have a nuclear option. And if you look at North Korea, we would, we hold these exercises, every year on, right across the border from North Korea. There's no doubt, there is no doubt at all, not even a smidgen of doubt, that if we had a conventional war, not we even, if South Korea had a conventional war with North Korea, they could defeat them hands down. When you look at the military capacity of South Korea and you look at the military capacity of North Korea and the equipment they have, and no doubt that this would be no war is a cakewalk, but it would be a massacre, of. But it doesn't matter because North Korea has nuclear weapons. You know, no one is going to test them in this way. So why are you doing these gigantic overkill operations with B-1 bombers and F-35s and ships of the Pacific Fleet and stuff, just to piss off and cause a reaction of Kim Jong Un? We know I mean, anybody who looks at the history of these attempts to negotiate with North Korea knows that this is unproductive. This gets the wrong reaction. And yet we can continue doing it, you know. And the North Koreans, when things were going a little bit along, like in 1984, and the North Koreans do something stupid, so we just cancel everything. You don't try to see what you can recover. You don't try to see what additional diplomacy you can use to recover the stupid, the wrong, the bad judgment of the North Koreans. You just, okay, we're going to go, to the wall on this. We're going to just really punish you. Well, now you have a North Korea that's got thermonuclear weapons and ICBMs. And let me tell you, I've done a lot of work on the ICBM program in North Korea. I've done a lot of analysis of their systems. Those guys could deliver a nuclear warhead. They could deliver several multi-hundred kiloton nuclear warheads to Washington, D.C. with this Hwasong 17 missile. That missile is a full-scale, no-nonsense ICBM. And all these little statements, it's hard to re-enter. If you look at the technology, it's just one monkey repeating what another monkey says. If you look at the technology of re-entry vehicles, not a problem. And you can't get anyone in the American government to think about this. So, for example, I have a concept I've been working on with a friend of mine, Richard Garwin, who's a very, very, very distinguished American scientist. And we put together a defense concept. We call it the Airborne Patrol. The idea is very simple in principle, but the question is, does the technology exist to do it? And it turns out the technology does exist to do it. And the idea is you carry very fast interceptors. They weigh maybe between 500 and 1,000 pounds, depending on details of the final system design. And the uncertainty is very large until we get a full design concept. And these interceptors fly outside the atmosphere. You launch them from under the wing of a high-flying drone, a drone that's flying at 50,000 feet. And if you're sitting over the Sea of Japan, it turns out that you can destroy a liquid propellant North Korean ICBM before it completes powered flight and deploys decoys, because our current system can't deal with decoys. It can't even deal with warheads, let alone warheads and decoys.
Yeah.
So this system works. Now, it's got a problem that's quite serious. The interceptors can't intercept shorter range ballistic missiles that could be used to attack Japan and South Korea, because the interceptor can't reach it in the short time of their powered flight. On the other hand, when I've talked to people inside of South Korea and Japan, specialists, they agree that this system could potentially be of great value, because the Japanese and South Koreans have grave doubts about whether the United States would stand behind them in a crisis with North Korea, where they were threatening nuclear attack against the United States. So the system is kind of a peculiar second-tier defense. That is to say, it protects the United States so that the United States can then stand behind South Korea and Japan. I can't get anybody in the U.S. government to even talk about this. They're all threatening North Korea with military exercises that just infuriate the North Koreans, that are going to lead to more large missile tests by North Korea in response, because the North Koreans do this in response, maybe leads to even more nuclear weapons tests, maybe even higher yield weapons that have been also designed to be carried on an ICBM. And they're not even interested in studying the possibility of this kind of defense. This is what our defense establishment looks like today. It's just a bunch of punks who who just talk to each other and exclude anybody who has the smallest difference of view from them, and just tell anybody who differs from them is naive and ignorant. Well, I got news for them. They're the ones who are naive and ignorant. And unfortunately, this is like I said, I like President Biden personally. Uh, Biden has failed himself and the country badly by allowing these characters to push him into doing some of the things he's now doing. This Nord Stream pipeline thing is an act of war.
Yeah.
And he did as much damage to our ally Germany as he did to Russia. That's not minor. Who needs an ally who does as much damage to you as they do to the adversary? So this is what we're looking at today. So accidental nuclear war, sure, it's a real possibility.
It almost makes you, and I don't really believe this, but just on the thread of wild speculation, it almost makes you think if there's some form of an SDI or a Star Wars program, and I personally don't believe this, but just
Yeah, go ahead.
As a thought exercise, our seeming recklessness and cockiness begs the question: is it is there something that has greatly increased the survivability of nuclear first strikes, which is terrible because anything that throws off the balance of power in nuclear war is ultimately leads to more chaotic. That's why we got rid of the ABMs in the 60s and 70s, is because they made nuclear war more palatable.
But your statement is more real and profound than I think even you are judging it to be, because if you listen very carefully to Putin, that you see him interviewed multiple times, and you don't spend your time trying to twist every statement he makes into indications of what a demon he is, but instead just put take it at face value and try to look at the reasoning behind what he's saying, which you may or may not agree with. You will see him make statements, as I've watched this very carefully because I'm very interested in what he might or might not be thinking. He will make statements about being concerned. He doesn't say it quite this explicitly, but it's very clear when you deconstruct what he's saying, that he has grave concerns that political leadership on the Western side, in particular the United States, might think that they could attack Russia and get away with it. That's a big concern he has, that an American president will be misinformed enough. He doesn't think that they can get away with it, but he's concerned that the other side could be misinformed enough to think they can get away with it.
Yes.
And because of that, that's part of the reason he has done things like introduce some of these new weapons so that even a moron could tell that you're not going to escape retribution. So, for example, this undersea Poseidon robot.
Yeah, the 200 megaton tsunami.
Right.
Torpedo.
So he spent this time talking about this intentionally because he wants even a moron to understand that a missile defense is not going to deal with that.
Yeah.
That's so he clearly is concerned about how much political leadership on the other side understands.
I mean, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I mean, which probably makes him a little bit more cautious, which is good.
Yeah.
But
it's right, it's Reagan and Gorbachev at Reykjavik.
Yeah.
Like, no, we just want a shield. We want a nuclear shield. Reagan would say it's like think of it like a gas mask, and Gorbachev was like, I know what you're saying, but if you're now wearing the gas mask, you're gonna start acting real cocky, and I want you to know I have other weapons than just gas. Is it essentially the analogy they were saying is it's me telling, it's me looking at my little brother and being like, hey, don't worry, I'm wearing a bulletproof vest. And then someone else is looking at the linebacker going, the linebacker's wearing a suicide bomb. Your vest isn't going to do anything. Our own misattribution of our strengths. We have satellite-based weapons. Putin's going, forget Poseidon. I'll just put one on a cargo ship. I'll just go
Yeah.
drive that into a port.
Well, he can drive a lot of them into the port with this Poseidon weapon.
Yeah.
Destroy every port on the Pacific, and that's it's an enormous part of the U.S. population and industrial base.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that uh, I lost my thought. My oh no,
Poseidon,
oh,
SDI,
sorry,
Gorbachev.
no. Uh, I've had some personal experiences that have served me well in causing me to think about these things. And just to give you a sense, I was in the Pentagon when, and I was an advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations when Ronald Reagan gave his Star Wars speech on March 4. What's it? 1984 was it? Yeah, I think 1983 maybe. The Star Wars speech,
Mm-hmm.
March 4. I remember. Must have been 83. And I came into the Pentagon the next day, and I would watch his speeches. My wife would hate it, but say, look, he's the president. I'm working it's national security.
He's my CEO.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I came into the Pentagon the next day, and then there was this Navy captain jumping around and bragging about how he convinced the chief of naval operations to go ahead with the Star Wars, that he played a role in the Star Wars speech. And he was talking about we're going to defend lives. He was bragging about the statement that was running around the Pentagon all of us that he supposedly invented. We're going to defend lives, not avenge them. And I confronted him to a shocked group of lower level officers because I was a civilian. It didn't matter to me who he was, and he couldn't answer me. But the result of that confrontation was I put together a briefing for the chief of naval operations because everyone was talking about how we were both going to have these defenses. At that time, they were not talking about what started it was this X-ray laser idea that was crazy. But what people were talking about was putting these giant laser battle stations in orbit.
Yeah.
And they would be chemically driven. So you have hydrogen fluoride or deuterium fluoride driven lasers, and you would set up a beam that and you destroy rockets from great range. Of course, they weren't nearly bright enough to be able to do this. It was all science fiction.
Yeah.
But that science fiction became the baseline for people running around and thinking they were doing something. So I was aware that Chief of Naval Operations had gone to the president and advocated for the Strategic Defense Initiative. I wasn't told about it before it happened. That's one of the reasons I was so angry at this guy. He was involved, and he didn't bring me into the process because I would have explained to the chief what a bad idea this was and why. Not because I'm trying to tell him why. I would have given him a briefing of the kind I gave him later. So what did I do in this briefing? I said, well, the idea is we're going to have a stable standoff. So we're saying the Russians are going to have this system and we're going to have this system, right? We're going to have these two orbiting systems, which are tremendously powerful and able to destroy the adversary's ICBMs from millions of meters, thousands of kilometers range while they're in space. So I said, well, if these systems are so powerful, they're in space, and since they're co-orbiting, they're very close to each other. So one side could, in theory, just using this model that people have put together, shoot first at the other's missile defense components, destroy them, and then you're in charge if you believe that this is possible. I was very careful to say this is not this is science fiction at this time, but let's just look at the logic of what people are now saying. And this guy, who clearly had been taken in by this argument, this chief, um, he uh, he he was just totally shocked. He hadn't even thought about this. So the shallowness, for me, the personal experience of seeing the shallowness of the top decision makers in the country with regard to this matter had a tremendous impact on my view of the world to this day. It's and I went to multiple briefings, listened while this chief went to these briefings, and listened to more and more and more nonsense, all generated by these various assistant secretaries of atomic energy and things like that, to the chief advocating these things. And I could see him sinking because he hadn't thought, he ran to the president with the nonsense that this naval officer had given him, told him, because he was concerned about the arms race. And he did the stupidest thing you could possibly do: go to your boss with an idea that was not just wrong, but was tremendously negative and damaging. And, he never owned up to it. So, so, so seeing this chaos. So when I had gone to the Pentagon, I knew that I would see a lot of things that I disagreed with, because I wasn't the Cold Warrior. I was afraid of the Russians because any country that can go out and murder tens of millions of its own people is not somebody
Yeah.
you take lightly. So it wasn't that I didn't think that there wasn't a problem, but I didn't think I didn't think that they ate their children and stuff like this Cold Warrior nonsense. And so I thought that I would see a lot of things I disagreed with, but were responsible. You could have an honest discussion about whether things were as claimed or not, and reach a consensus about that was reasonable. But what I saw when that Star Wars thing happened, right up at the top, at the secretary levels and at the Secretary of Defense level, Weinberger at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, these people are capable of anything, these people in these leadership roles. And that has stayed with me. And I don't think it was because it was Ronald Reagan and those people he had around him. I'm worried about Biden and the people he has around them. Because these guys they're in, a friend of mine calls it the boofosphere. They just, he says they make these loud boof, 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 like they're profound. It's an inside joke, But they're all talking to, and it's a closed system because anybody who has alternative
Is naive.
views or arguments or information gets just smeared as naive and unsophisticated, when in fact the unsophisticated people are these people themselves. So it's a very dangerous situation. It's extraordinarily dangerous.
I mean, it's kind of symbolic. I mean, it starts with banning people on Twitter or YouTube,
Yeah,
ban those who disagree. It very quickly
yeah.
goes all the way up to, hey, just ban anybody that says a
I,
first strike is a bad
I've
idea.
been essentially banned from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist. I published for 4 decades. I published numerous articles that were featured on the front cover because of the significance they were viewed to have had. Okay, these were, in the eyes of the editors of the bulletin, these were gigantic insights, and in fact, relative to a lot of the stuff they published, they were. And I just been banned by them because they don't like my stuff now. You just
Yes.
So what can you do? You know, in a strange way, I said this to Cy actually. I found it this very disturbing the way the national press dealt with his brilliant journalism. But at the same time, I felt a little relieved because I feel like I've been closed out of so many things that to have somebody as good as Cy is
Yeah.
and writing stuff as widely important. I mean, I'm a nuclear specialist. I mean, he's talking about the fundamental issues in our nation's security. To see what they do to him, it says to me, we're really in trouble. We are really in trouble.
Yeah, it kind of makes you feel less crazy when you see someone else gets
Yeah, when they do that to
yeah.
someone,
Yeah, I mean,
someone
I've been
his
perma banned
capabilities.
from YouTube, Reddit, iTunes. I just got back on Twitter, but
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
banned from a ton of, but then you start to feel better when you see other people banned, but then you look at the big picture and go, "This is not good." Yeah, I mean, this is that none of this has really, reassured me, and I think on what you were saying about those 2 space stations, I think the Russians actually did it. One of their, space stations, one of their orbiting labs, I think it was called Salyut, S-A
Soyuz,
no,
Soyuz,
not the Soyuz. I think it was
uh,
Salyut,
Salyut, yeah,
Salyut dash
Salyut.
22. They actually put an AA gun on one of them,
They actually put a what?
an AA gun, like an anti-aircraft gun. It was
Soil
declassified after
guns.
the Cold War. So they had a manned satellite with just a, like a mounted machine gun. And it was in
Yeah,
case the Americans got close.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like,
Well, it wouldn't help them much because the way the Americans would attack it wouldn't stop them. But
but it goes forever. It's just the
yeah, it's
arms
just
race is
one.
eternal.
Yeah, but putting even if they do that, uh, it's a statement, and the statement raises the level of tension.
Yeah.
That's the problem. When you go out in the street and you're carrying something that looks like a shotgun, it doesn't matter whether it's actually a shotgun or not.
Yeah.
People react to it, and people, maybe someone else goes and gets a real gun, or
Yeah.
this is not this is not a couple of kids in kindergarten
This is for keeps.
throwing mud at each other. This is serious. And how you deal with these problems as a national leader matters a great deal. And that's why I'm so concerned about the way the Biden administration has been handling things. So the Russians are doing what I pretty much expect them to do. I don't think it's good. I don't support it, but it's pretty much what I expect them to do.
Predictable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm only 32, but this episode was not good for my heart health.
No, no, well, you got a lot of life to live, and I hope you live it and enjoy it.
Well, me too. I mean, short of an ICBM coming down, I think I got a while left, but
Yeah. It,
well,
I, I hope cooler heads will prevail. I think that the fear of a general escalation is going to be so great that it's not going to happen trivially. Probably not going to happen trivially.
yeah.
But everything that I've experienced indicates to me that anything is possible. That's the bottom line. Anything is possible.
And
And it's
then,
because you're dealing with humans, they're imperfect.
but then there's also the anything is possible, including good. I mean, you have the Cuban
Yeah.
Missile Crisis, Bobby Kennedy, bringing messages to some, whatever building, and them using a private courier on a bicycle, and Khrushchev and Kennedy talking, you know, on back lines and completely going around Curtis LeMay, and it worked. So it's like
Yeah.
the,
And
anything is possible, including good.
and if you initiated the experiment 10 times, the question is, would it have worked 10 times or one time or
Hey, it worked once, so we're still here. So it's
no, no, I think the important thing is it works.
yeah,
But the
that works
problem
at
is if
all.
it doesn't work, there's only one there's only one outcome where it doesn't work that leads to annihilation. That's
So
the
I
problem.
I need to go move to downtown Manhattan. That's where I need to go. Is just
Yeah.
right. I need to go do this podcast in the West
Well,
Wing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's how I know I'll be good.
But anyway, I'm hopeful. I am hopeful that people are so afraid of these weapons that it's not it's not truly a statistical situation,
Yeah.
because the bias against using them. I have a discussion that's going on with a friend of mine who's a mathematician, and he keeps asking me, "Can you give me a probability of per day or per year that you think a nuclear war could occur?" And I say, it's just not possible. There's no underlying. It's not as if it's what you would call an underlying stable statistical set of variables uh, uh, that allow you to assign a probability per unit time. There are going to be fluctuations in whatever those variables are, and sometimes it's going to be much more likely, and sometimes much less. It's just but so I don't know how to characterize it as a probability distribution, but hopefully there's a factor in there that reduces it greatly. And I think that factor is that everybody I've ever encountered who has any decision-making role of any kind that could be involved in the use of nuclear weapons is so scared to death that they would have to make a decision that you could see they would do everything they possibly can to not use these weapons. And you hope that doesn't mean that will stop them, but you hope that that is what explains how we got through the Cold War. Because if the Cold War were a purely average statistical situation,
Never would have survived.
we wouldn't have made it through. I mean, that's the calculation I would have done. I'd say no, no way. But every time, you know, Khrushchev and Kennedy looked into the abyss and they backed away.
That Soviet sailor on the submarine that came up during the Cuban Missile Crisis and
Yeah,
told his men to turn down. There was another
yeah,
one where like the zeros in some war game tape in NORAD were somehow replaced by twos, and they thought that 2,222 ICBMs were inbound. And then like
yeah,
the head guy was like, "Hold on, isn't Khrushchev like at the UN?" And
yeah.
they're like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Hold on," and just
Well,
that
that's
basic, you go, let's everybody chill. When we've
but if that kind of thing happens at a time where we're fighting, or maybe nuclear weapons have been used at a low
yeah,
level somewhere,
tactical already. Yeah.
so the external conditions matter a lot. So it's not a stable probabilistic environment, and and the probability of all these things coalescing is very small, but it's not zero. That's the problem.
I'm just gonna make sure I have like a couple gallons of whiskey in case it goes down.
If you like it, if you
I'll
like
just
whiskey.
hey, I won't care. I'll just want something that I'll just go sit on the back
Yeah,
porch, put on some bathing shorts, some suntan shorts, and just wait for the flash.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Well, Dr. Postal, this was terrifying but awesome. Um,
I hope.
I appreciate your time. I'll send you the link to this right afterwards, and
I'd appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
I'd love to get you back on here and scare the wits out of me and my
Well,
wife.
I'm not expert like these other people, so I don't generally get asked.
Nobody's.
I'm only joking.
I'll have on the guys that if they say they're naive, I'm like, well, then that's the guy I want to talk to because
Yeah,
that's
right.
you're outside of
Well,
the
it's
bubble.
I'd be happy to be on with one of these other people who thinks they're so expert.
Yeah.
Have a debate. If you can arrange that, that'd be fine.
Hey, you tell me. You can email me. Tell me who you want to debate. I'll do my best to.
Oh,
I've got an okay reach for my podcast. I've gotten in touch with some guests that I have no business talking to, so I
yeah.
might be able to. Who knows?
All right.
Putin hasn't
South.
responded to my email, so
He hasn't responded to your
and
emails.
I
No.
actually did email him. I did before the war, so I don't think he's gonna
Yeah.
do it now.
Yeah.
I
No,
got.
he's not gonna. He's gonna
I
focus
think he's
on.
busy with something.
Yeah, he's busy.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, Dr. Postal, thank you so much, sir. I'll email you this. We'll schedule another one. And thank you for your time. And I might have a drink tonight. Just
Well, whatever. I hope don't take me too seriously.
yeah,
I
yeah,
try not to take I try not to take me too seriously.
yeah. Hey,
And
well,
I
you
can
know
tell you
what?
my wife doesn't take me seriously at all.
Hey, whatever happens, happens. That's kind of how I'm looking at
It's beyond our control. All
it.
we can do is try to do what we can. I'm 77 now, so I'll be 77 in April, and I'm reaching a time where a 10-year horizon means something to me.
Sure.
When you're 30, a 10-year horizon doesn't mean anything, and uh, and I'm very concerned about the future, and I'm also very aware that possibilities for me communicating my concerns are diminishing all the time, at least at the moment. And I've just resolved that I'm just going to do what I can to alert people as best I can to the issues.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get, I have to say, I've gone through some periods of depression about all this, but
Sure.
I'm just not going to let it ruin, the last years of my life. It's just not going to, I'm going to
Absolutely.
do what I think is responsible so that I feel like I'm being responsible to the generations that I hope to help that are behind me and or ahead of me, depending on how you look at it. And that's it. I'm not going to get myself sick over this.
When I was right after my older brother took his life in 2014,
Oh,
I
I'm sorry
eventually
to hear
had the
that.
realization that I couldn't let this, after a couple of years of despair, I realized that I couldn't let it rob me the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
I found a song, I think it's from the 90s. It's called Steal My Sunshine. And
Yes.
it's very upbeat and it's about not letting anything steal your sunshine. And in the
Yeah.
worst days of my life, I would turn that on and just be like, you know what? I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna say
Well,
what I think's
that's
right, and but I'm gonna enjoy my dinner tonight. I'm gonna enjoy a hot
yeah.
shower. I'm not gonna let it steal my sunshine.
I think that's you're doing the right thing for yourself and for other people because you're more able to help them too.
Yes,
So
sir.
I come from a very troubled family background myself, so I have great sympathy for your
Thank you, sir.
situation.
It's
So
you know, but not gonna steal my sunshine. I'm gonna enjoy.
well, you do what you can when you can.
Yes,
That's
sir.
it. And things that are beyond your control, they're beyond your control. There's no
Under your
point in.
control.
You can be aware of them. You can try to do what you can when you can, and that's it.
It's like what Alan Watts said. He said worrying about things that are out of your control is like chewing bubble gum to solve an algebra problem. Does nothing.
Well, chewing bubble gum could help you. It might relax you. So,
Well, there you go. Well, chew some bubble gum. Don't let it steal your sunshine. Whatever happens, happens.
right.
Dr. Postal, we got to wrap this one up because I got another one in a couple minutes. Thank you
Yeah,
so
good.
much for your time, sir. I'll
Thank you
email
very
you this
much.
link. Yes, sir.
I very much enjoy working with you.
I love talking to you, man. It's terrifying, but it's enlightening. So,
Okay, well, thank you. Don't be terrified. Just
okay,
learn.
okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much.